Gardens! Gardens!
All my friends know the low rider. The low rider is a little higher.
Hello, my name is Très Petite, and I'm speaking to all those who are concerned here in the year 2024 about the future of the United States of America. My intention is to address all U.S. citizens as well as all of our Latin American immigrants. I speak today as a Christian, and my lovely wife is a Catholic Latina, and I say all this loudly and proudly because here in America we exercise our constitutional rights of freedom of speech and freedom of religion, and this is the greatest nation on God's green earth. I'm not a politician, even though I do love food. I'm only Très Petite, a very small man. Nevertheless, I'm here to tell you today what our U.S. politicians should be telling you right now and are not. We shall also explore President Trump's assassination attempt on July 13th, a day that will live in infamy. And of course, we'll talk about the unelected nominee for the Democratic Socialists, Kamala Harris, who gave us 39 days of her Biden impersonation before she could handle a pre-taped interview on the Clinton News Network. She even had to hold hands with Tim Falso. No real policy information, only, listen, Dana, whatever your name is, my values have not changed. Even though they appear to change completely. And I bet she wishes the one debate with Trump would just go away. Why do we have to discuss policies? I just want to smile and laugh and do my joyful impersonation for the cameras. Socialism and Marxism are such pretty ideas. Like me. Mon Dieu. But really, does it even matter who the candidates are for the Democrats? We'll discuss this as well. Point number one. What we need to understand about immigration. To all of the 11 or so million immigrants who have crossed our borders in the last few years due to the President Joe bribe them, you need to understand the country you just entered and how they're right now using you as pawns to help turn America into another socialist Venezuela. And then they will use you to help form a socialist government. They may give you ID cards, amnesty, and voter ID cards. They may give you money for food and shelter. The Socialist Democrats are already doing these things, paid for by the U.S. taxpayer just to get your vote. But later on, you won't be able to tell the U.S. from Venezuela if you, all of you, U.S. citizens and immigrants alike, I don't care what race you are, Latin American, African American, Caucasian American, French American, as am I. It doesn't matter if you continue supporting Joe Biden's Socialist Democrats, you'll convert the U.S. into another Venezuela. Or Latin American immigrants, you know what happened to Venezuela. Some of you come from there. The rest of you know exactly what happened there, with more than 2 million emigrating out due to poverty, hunger, joblessness, the political corruption, the greed. We've seen a magnificent and beautiful country and culture absolutely devastated, n'est-ce pas? Why? Because in the words of the British novelist George Orwell, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. Point number two, let's understand who the players are. For the past 3 years, we've all understood that this really hasn't been about Joe Biden, and the first presidential debate absolutely proved it. It was a disaster for Biden. So who are the real players? A good place to start is a sworn testimony of Maria Zack, given in Kansas on November 8, 2023. It is found at Truth Justice as Spartan Justice on X, formerly Twitter, and I quote, Italian intelligence along with U.S. sworn testimony confirms that 2020 U.S. presidential election was stolen from President Trump. So this is really about Italy. Quote, Italy's Leonardo satellites being controlled from Italy added votes to Biden to defeat Trump. U.S. federal prosecutor John Durham has in his possession documents of evidence that shows Barack Obama illegally moved $400 million in cash on pallets through the Dubai embassy with the help of the Italians. They acquired $400 million from whom? Wouldn't that be interesting to find out, you politicians? And put the money into a Merrill Lynch account in Geneva, Switzerland. Senator Renzi, who was a friend of former President Barack Obama, and General Graziano are also part of the scheme in Italy. Unquote. Mrazak further outlines how a telemetry expert, bald fellow, loaded software for the Galileo satellite while in Rome. We don't know who this baldy is yet. There's another telemetry expert named Charles Robinson, an employee of Dominion, who has admitted to changing elections as far back as the early 2000s, so for 20 years now, such as for Gianna Napolitano in her run for Arizona governor. Alexander Nix of Cambridge Analytica was engaged in election manipulation back in 2016, and according to Mrazak, there have been 42 elections stolen so far around the world using the same methods of vote count manipulation through Dominion voting machines and Italian satellites. We've also heard separate testimony, other than Mrazak's, that it is possible to manipulate votes on a Dominion voting machine simply with the use of one ballpoint pen. And now on Core.com, they just provided the news that 3 whistleblowers from Dominion voting systems have come forward with claims to support all of that. They claim that Dominion changed 3.8 million votes in order to steal the election for Joe Biden. Further, they claim to have stolen elections in Italy, Spain, China, Argentina, and some 3 dozen other countries. Mon Dieu. 42 elections worldwide in about 30 countries. How come the CIA and the Pentagon don't spend their time and money and investigate which elections have been stolen so far? Because Barack O'Bribery was in office for 8 years, methodically putting into place the heads of these organizations so that one day he could hatch his plan. And this is why right now the DOJ, the FBI, the CIA are all corrupt from the leadership on down. N'est-ce pas? Is it not so? It's possible that they were all bribed in one way or another. Where are the investigations? And what about the Italians? And why assassinate Trump, you bunch of insurrectionists? Merci, Justine. And Justin brings up a very good point. Where are the protests? If the pro-Palestinian movement can raise 9,000 people, mostly young, naive college students, why can't America raise up at least 9,000 patriots protesting on the streets of each of our major cities, telling the politicians, we will not become the United Social States of America. You can take your USSA and shove it on your stinky toilet. Over the blood of the patriots who gave their lives to allow us to be free from the tyrant George III, to be free from religious persecution in Europe, and on and on. N'est-ce pas, Monsieur Credibo? So that brings us back to the question, who are the real players? Many people know that Barack O'Bribery was a student of the socialist activist writer Saul Alinsky. Hillary Clinton completed her master's thesis on Saul Alinsky. And think about the origins of O'Bribery care, Hillary care, n'est-ce pas? And do you also remember what happened in the 2016 presidential election with our wonderful Marxist Hillary Clinton, Hillary and her crew? That they actually stopped the election on election night. They paused it. Why? They tried stealing that election too, but there was so much support for Donald Trump that his votes overwhelmed the algorithm. Remember all that? Remember Hillary Clinton and her debunked Steele dossier that her campaign paid for? Why? Because Democrats lie and lie. Well, that was an election that should have been stolen, and thankfully it wasn't. So they had 4 years to work on it, up until 2020. And in 2020 they did it. They added mail-in ballot fraud, and they pulled stunts like in Georgia. Oh no, the experts said nothing illegal was going on there. They also increased the number of parameters for the election fraud, used the Dominion voting machines that were used so successfully down in Venezuela, and they made it foolproof. And miraculously, Joe Biden won with a record 85 million votes. More than any other president in the history of the U.S., right? N'est-ce pas? Always because of COVID, right? And all those mail-in ballots. So that now brings in Hillary Clinton and China. After all, the coronavirus originated from the leak in the Wuhan lab, right? They were doing gain-of-function research under Dr. Anthony Fauci, who lied and lied about gain-of-function, right? Because Democrats lie and lie. And oh yes, we can't forget that it was under President Barack Obama that the Pentagon paid $4 million to the Wuhan lab in China to research bat viruses and how to transfer them to humans, right? But again, nothing that we say has any similarity to reality, because this is all fiction, right? And these are all honorable men. Barack Obama, Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, Dr. Anthony Fauci, executives at Dominion, all honorable men, n'est-ce pas? They do not want you, all the Latin Americans in the United States, to hear this message. And they do not want Latin Americans to realize that the party of the Socialist Democrats is also the party of abortion, the killing of the unborn. Why? Because approximately 90% of Latin Americans are Catholic and support the sanctity of human life. You see, they can't let that message get out. It might upset their plan of governmental domination. And the plan, of course, it's truly diabolical, is really a socialist Democrat seated as U.S. president for the next 100 years, because the Marxist Democrats will control all the voting. Now remember that in the U.S. it's just enough to make it look like an election was close. Just keep the polls coming that Trump and Chameleon are close, and then, oh mon Dieu, Chameleon won 50.1% of the vote. What do you know? It was so close. Okay, everybody go home. Feel good that you tried. Yes, that's how we do it here in the United States. For instance, what happened in Arizona in 2020? where they've been successfully rigging elections since Gianna Napolitano's race for governor? Trump won 49.06% and O'Brien supposedly won 49.36%. What do you know? Yes, that is how we do it here in the United States. What a 20-ton freight car of horse bucky. Mon Dieu. Here's an idea. Why doesn't Donald Trump, when he's reelected in 2024, may the Lord have mercy, create a new agency, the Election Security Agency? Yes, the ESA. They would focus for 365 days a year on election integrity. What a concept, because currently no one wants to get a handle on it. Not the Supreme Court, not the Congress. That way election integrity just might get the attention it deserves. The times they are changing, and sometimes we have to think outside the proverbial box in order to adapt to modern nemesis of a technological age, n'est-ce pas? Why couldn't our politicians, supposedly very intelligent, very learned, think of that? Oh, and for those of you who despise America, ask yourself this question. What was America's role in the ending of World War I and World War II? Have you seen pictures of American soldiers freeing the emaciated Jewish captives in the many German concentration camps and also throughout Europe? And what was the meaning of the term Nazi? The party of the Nationalist Socialists. True? Tell me, what would the world look like if there were no America to help stem the tide of evil that always seeks to raise itself up in the world? Many, many thanks go out to the courageous Elon Musk for purchasing Twitter for $35 billion so that American citizens could have a voice without being censored on Facebook and all those other sites. He is another Paul Revere of today. Point number 7. Justin. What? I wanted to wear a hat, but I didn't want to mess up my hair. Just incredible you are. Simply amazing. Now, where was I? And he also said he wanted to transform America. Really? Tell me, why did our country need transforming? And Joe Biden is pathetically mentally deficient now. And he's simply been a puppet for the past 3.5 years, n'est-ce pas? The first presidential debate proved that. Mon Dieu, the first debate was like a great white shark for the poor swindler Joe Biden, misère du misère. Ooh. And anyone they put in place of Joe Biden will simply be a puppet for Barack Bribery. They allegedly called on President Barack Bribery and Hillbilly Clinton to vet all the candidates for president and vice president. That's good for telling them the rules of the land. And the one rule is very simple. Just do everything exactly the way the deep state tells you. I'm sure both Kamala Harris and Tim Falso have already agreed to that rule. Kamala Chameleon admits to being a radical. And what is Minnesota Governor Tim Falso famous for saying? One person's socialism is another person's neighborliness. Chameleon has supposedly flip-flopped on at least 5 major issues and doesn't want those horrible press conferences. That's why she held one of those shortest presidential acceptance speeches in American history. The media can keep on gushing about her joy and not say anything about her radical socialist policies. Mon Dieu. Just think about what the Democratic Socialists and the media have done to Steve Bannon and the others, and are currently trying to do to the President Trump. Yep, vilify them and lock them up in prison, or perhaps neutralize them, because that's how communist countries work. You control the masses by controlling the vote, controlling the message, and eliminating dissidents. These are the real Paul Reveres of today. These are the Joan of Arcs, the true patriots. For my last point, point number 13, we must return to Saul Alinsky. One of the Marxist tactics enumerated by Alinsky, always claim your opponent is doing the very things you are doing. That's why on CNN and MSNBC they claim that Trump and the Republicans are threats to the very nature of democracy, that we advocate violence and will lock everybody up in prisons and camps if we win in November, that once Trump wins in November he will never step down from the presidency again. It's exactly the things that the Marxist Democrats are trying to do right now, is it not so? They just want to muddy the waters and confuse people. A second Marxist strategy? Never let a good tragedy go to waste. Hence the coronavirus, n'est-ce pas? In closing, I'm getting a text right now. Someone asks, my dear friend Très Petite, what can we do about all of this? So glad you asked. Barack O'Brien and his communist neo-Marxist friends are trusting that Americans have Alzheimer's, but we do not. So, number 1, we protest. Let's get our country back, so help us God. But it starts very small. Try to get 3 people and then 8 on a Saturday morning for picketing. And as the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. used to say, we always do it in peace. The times to protest for us are now. Exercise our freedom of speech and freedom of assembly. Demand to know, where are the investigations? And what about the Italians? And why assassinate Trump? Insurrectionists? What about the election fraud of 2016, 2020, and then what we will face in 2024? Are we willing to lose our country to a bunch of Italians with their satellites and a bunch of socialist communists? Number 2, spread this video or the transcript of it to as many friends as you can throughout the U.S. Number 3, call And email your state and federal representatives in government and pray that there are still honest politicians who actually listen. Each citizen should call and email at least 7 times. If they question why you are calling back, tell them you have Alzheimer's. Number 4, vote Trump and Vance and the real patriotic Republicans in because we are the anti-communist, anti-socialist, anti-Marxist party. The Democratic Party of your parents doesn't exist anymore. It has been commandeered, co-opted by the neo-Marxist elites. They have tried to throw President Trump in jail. They've tried to bankrupt him and silence him. Now they've tried to assassinate him. Dear U.S. citizens and immigrants alike, let's make a pact together to kick this social scourge out of this country while there's still time. The socialists, the Marxists, the communists just don't care about human life. They view President Trump as simply getting in the way of their lust for absolute power. And let me say that Trump is talking about deportations right now. Dear immigrants, he is saying what has to be said right now because the border is a disaster as a result of Joe Biden's socialist cronies. Yes, deportations. But I believe there are many Republicans, just like myself, très petite, who understand that the immigrants, did not arrive here because of climate change, like the lying Democrats say you have. There's another 20-ton freight car of horsepucky. You arrived here because you couldn't get a job. You couldn't provide for your family. So I agree with President Trump. The first thing we have to do is secure our borders and return to doing immigration and citizenship legally. After that, I, très petite, think it should be up to the American people. The American people, the little person, well, like me, and all the common everyday citizens. We should decide about topics like amnesty versus deportations. We recall how one of the best U.S. presidents ever, a Republican, President Ronald Reagan in the 1980s, put into place an amnesty and path to citizenship for those without criminal backgrounds. President Ronald Reagan's was a compassionate conservatism, and I expect no less from President Donald Trump, given number 1, a secure border, and number 2, the will of the American people.